Hey everybody, welcome back. Donnie Eisenhower here. And today we're diving into Chapter 13, Real Property Valuation. And I'm telling you right now, in this chapter, there are some important information that you need to know. You're going to see appraisals, CMAs versus BPOs, market value, depreciation, cap rate, sales comparison approach, cost approach, income approach, and again, yes, there is math in this chapter. But the good news is the math is actually pretty straightforward once you understand the concepts. So grab the worksheet in the link description below, pause the video where you need to, and let's jump into Chapter 13. What is an appraisal? Let's start with the foundation of this question here. What is an appraisal? An appraisal is an opinion of value by a licensed appraiser on a specific date. That specific date part matters because values constantly change. A house may appraise at $400,000 today. Next month it may appraise at $410,000, and then 6 months later it may only be $385,000. So market conditions change constantly. And so remember, appraisals determine value, not price. Appraisals determine value, not price. So important vocabulary you need to understand is that you must know the difference between value, price, and cost. Value is what a property is worth. Price, what is actually sold for, what the property actually sold for. And then cost, what it costs to build or produce that property. And so you need to understand these are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. Cost, price, and value. So let's talk about FIRREA. FIRREA, F-I-R-R-E-A. And what that stands for is the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989. This came after the savings and loan crisis. And so what Congress did was they realized that lenders were making risky loans and that appraisals were unreliable and fraud was happening everywhere. So what FIRREA, whatever you say that name, created was that federal appraisal oversight, and it created state licensing requirement and appraisal standards. That's why appraisers must be licensed. And so remember, appraisers need only appraisal license. They do not need a real estate license. But what we can do as licensed real estate agents are BPOs and CMAs. BPOs and CMAs. These things that we can actually do for our client. And so a BPO and a CMA. In North Carolina, BPO is broker price opinion. CMA is comparative market analysis. And so under North Carolina law, they are considered the same thing. But here's the key. A broker does not determine value. A broker estimates probable sales price and probable list price. They also can determine probable lease price. You cannot call it value, you cannot call it worth, and you cannot call it appraisal. That's what gets brokers in trouble. Appraisers can call it value, worth, and appraisal, but real estate agents, we cannot. But what can we do, or who can do a BPO for a fee? Who can do a BPO for a fee? If you are outside of a transaction charging a fee, you only need to be a non-provisional broker. A non-provisional broker can perform a BPO or a CMA for free. You cannot be a provisional broker. And it must be in writing. You must inspect the property. You must know the market area, and it cannot be for a loan purpose. And so a BPO and a CMA helps us with market value. And so let's talk about the best definition of a market value. A market value is what a willing buyer would pay and a willing seller would accept in an arm's length transaction. So what is an arm's length transaction? That means there's no pressure, no duress, both parties are informed, and it is an open market exposure. So this is probably an important valuation definition to know, is arm's length value. Let's talk a little bit about assessed value. In North Carolina, counties attempt to assess property values. That is 100% of market value. And they usually assess those values every 8 years. And this is connected to ad valorem taxes. We've talked about ad valorem taxes in an earlier chapter. But ad valorem means according to value. Property taxes are ad valorem. The four elements of value to consider here is DUST. We use the acronym DUST. D-U-S-T. So DUST helps us determine value. DUST, D, demand. Demand. People must want the property and have the ability to buy it. U, utility. The property must be useful. The property must be useful. S, scarcity. That is limited supply increases value. And then T, transferability. Ownership must transfer easily. No clear title, then the value drops. If one of these is missing, then the value is affected. And so there are other forces that affect value. And so there are 4 forces that influence value. You got social, economic, environmental, and governmental. And so examples of these would be interest rates, the school ratings, what is the property zoned for, crime, highways, and job growth. They all affect value of a property. Let's talk a little bit about economic principles of value. Now we get into the big principles, because these show up all over the place throughout the exam. And so you want to understand highest and best use, the most profitable legal use of the property. Highest and best use, the most profitable and legal use of the property. And so key point to understand here is that a property only has one highest and best use at a time. Let's talk about the principle of substitution. This is an important concept in real estate valuation and appraisal. The principle of substitution says a buyer will not pay more for a property than the cost of purchasing a similar substitute property. In simple terms, if 2 homes are very similar, the buyer usually chooses the cheaper one. Supply and demand. Low inventory, prices are high. Too many homes, the prices drop. Supply and demand. That's simple economics. Conformity. Properties maintain a maximum value when they conform to the surrounding properties. That's why neighborhoods have CCRs, HOAs, and they have architectural standards. And so within a neighborhood, you may see progression or you may see regression. And what progression is a less expensive home increases in value near more expensive homes. Regression, expensive homes lose value near lower value homes. So for example, a mansion sitting next to a rundown property, that would be regression, because that rundown property would have a negative effect on that mansion's value. Anticipation. Future events affect the value today. So for example, a shopping center is announced and everyone's excited. A city announced new shopping center, restaurants, walking trails, and a new highway exit. Values may rise before the construction even starts. because the buyers anticipate the convenience of that shopping center. They understand that growth may come in, higher future demand, and increased in property values. So people are willing to pay more today based upon the expected future benefits. Contribution. This is the value of an improvement that adds to a property. Now, important, cost does not always equals contribution. A homeowner spends $25,000 installing a luxury outdoor kitchen with a built-in grill, a pizza oven, granite countertops, and an outdoor TV. But the buyer in that neighborhood or the buyers in that neighborhood are only willing to pay $10,000 more for a home with that feature. So even though the owner spent $25,000, the contribution to value was only $10,000. Just because the seller spends the money on upgrades does not mean the market will reimburse them. Does not mean a value increase for dollar for dollar. There may be some value increase, but not necessarily a dollar for dollar. So the buyer determines the contribution. Competition. Profits affect competition. So for example, everybody starts building apartments in one particular area because they have high rents. But eventually, supply rises, everybody starts building in that area, and then profits shrink. Change. Neighborhoods constantly go through cycles, such as growth, stability, decline, or renewal. Real estate markets never stay frozen. Let's talk about assemblage and plotlage. Assemblage means combining two or more separate parcels of land into one larger parcel of land to increase that value. This is most common with commercial properties, developers wanting to develop shopping centers and apartment complex. Plottage, that is, a owner develops one large 20-acre tract of land. So instead of keeping it as one large 20-acre tract of land, the seller is going to develop it and to subdivide it into 40 residential lots. That would include roads and sidewalks and utilities. And so now each lot can be sold individually and homes are constructed on those lots. And so the total value of all 40 lots combined is much greater than the original value of one single tract of land. So now let's talk about determining values of property. There are different ways to determine values of property. You have sales comparison approach to determine value. This is the most common approach. The sales comparison approach compares similar recently sold properties, and then you adjust the comps, and then it's based upon estimated market value. This is the main method for residential properties, homes that are in subdivisions or in neighborhoods. And so they look at subject property versus comparable properties or comps. Now the subject property is the property that is being appraised. The comps or the comparable properties are similar recently sold properties, usually within 6 months and nearby to the subject property. And they have similar characteristics such as square footage, room count, and lot size. And so when you're looking at these comparables, this is crucial to understand. You always adjust the value to the comparable. You never adjust the subject. So memorize this. SS, subtract the superior property. II, increase the inferior subproperty. So if the comp is better, than the subject, then you subtract the superior property. If the comp is worse than the subject, then you add value, you increase the inferior property. So for example, if the subject only has 3 bedrooms, but the comp has 4 bedrooms, you subtract a bedroom to make the comp look like the subject. You subtract the value of the bedroom to help come up with the price of the subject. So a quick example here. Let's say a comp sold for $300,000. It has a finished bedroom, a finished basement, but the subject property does not have a finished basement. The basement contributes $10,000 to the value. So since the comp is superior to the subject, you subtract $10,000 from the $300,000. So the adjusted comp is now $290,000. So when we're talking through CMAs and making adjustments like this, here's the mindset that we kind of want to have. Think of it like Robin Hood. You take from the rich, you take from the superior property, and you give to the poor. You give to the poor. You're trying to make the comp equal to the subject property. Now let's talk about the cost approach. The cost approach. The cost approach is best used for unique properties such as schools, churches, new construction, and properties without good comps around. It is the only approach that will use depreciation. So let's take a look at this formula. The formula is land value plus recent cost to build it minus the depreciation. That will give you the property value. So let's say an appraiser, they determine that the land value is $80,000. The replacement cost to make it brand new again would be $320,000. And so the depreciation is $40,000. What is the value of the property? What would be the value of the property? So first, you take the replacement cost and you subtract the depreciation. You got the $320,000, the replacement cost to make it like new, minus the $40,000, that's the depreciation. That will give you $280,000. Now, with that $280,000, we're going to add in that $80,000 land value. Then that will give us the value of $360,000. So the estimated property value would be $360,000. Now, here are some things that you need to know. Land never depreciates. Land never depreciates. Now, structures on that land will depreciate, but the land does not. The land does not depreciate. Let's look at replacement versus reproduction. Replacement versus reproduction. Replacement cost builds something similar using modern materials. And then what is the reproduction cost? The exact duplication of that property. And so reproduction is often used for things like historical buildings. Historical buildings. You can also use the square foot method. This is the most common method, and the formula for the square foot method is square footage times the cost per square foot. So, for example, you have 2,000 square feet and you have $150 as a cost per square foot. Then that gives you a value of $300,000 for that property. We've mentioned depreciation. Let's talk about depreciation for a moment. Depreciation means lost in value for any reason. And so there are three major types of depreciation. Number one is physical deterioration. That's normal wear and tear on the property. That would be peeling paint, it could be broken windows or worn out carpet. Now, physical deterioration is usually curable, meaning they can easily be fixed. The next is functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence. Problems inside of the property lines. Problems inside of the property. And so an example of that would be an outdated floor plan, like a bedroom. You have to go through another bedroom for access. It could be low ceilings, or the kitchen could be outdated. And so a classic example of this would bedroom access through another bedroom. This would be functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence. Then you also have economic obsolescence. These are eternal factors. Think of it as problems or factors outside of the property line. That could be a landfill It could be airport noise. It could be close to railroad tracks and the noise that comes by from trains. Or it could be odor from a chicken farm. And so remember, economic obsolescence is always incurable, meaning it's not easily fixed. So we've hit on incurable versus incurable. Let's dive a little bit more in that. Curable, it can be fixed. It can be fixed. It can be fixed economically, non-expensive to fix. Incurable cannot be fixed, or it costs too much to fix. Now, let's talk about an age-life method. The formula for determining age-life method is you got the effective age divided by the economic life, and then you multiply that for replacement costs. So, for example, effective age is 10 years. Economic life is 50 years. The replacement cost is $300,000. So what we do is we take the 10 years, that's the effective age. We divide it by 50 years. That's the economic life. That will equal 0.2. So now what we do with that 0.2 is we multiply that by $300,000. That $300,000, that is the replacement cost. So that gives us a $60,000 depreciation. So depreciation for this age-life method is $60,000 of depreciation. Let's look at the income approach. This is mainly used for investment properties, apartments, such as duplexes or shopping centers. And so the income approach measures the investment performance. And this is where you're going to hear about cap rate. Cap rate, or the capitalization rate, the formula is the value, or the value equals the NOI divided by the rate. The NOI divided by the rate equals the formula. Now you hear me say NOI, that is an acronym for net operating income. NOI means net operating income. So compare a cap rate example. Let's say that the NOI is $60,000. The investor wants a 10% return. So what we do is we take that $60,000 NOI, we divide that by a 10% return, and that gives us $600,000. That would be $600,000 NOI, or a $600,000 return. So let's do another problem. An investor is analyzing a small apartment building. The property produces a gross annual income of $180,000. The apartment complex, the apartment building, has an operating expense of $60,000. The property is for sale. It is listed for $1,500,000. $1,500,000. So what is the capitalization rate, or the cap rate of the property? Would it be A, 4%, B, 6%, C, 8%, or D, 12%? Let's work this step by step. So first, what we need to do is calculate the net operating income, the NOI. That is $180,000 gross annual income. We're now going to minus the $60,000, the operating expense. Then that gives us $120,000 NOI. So now we use the cap rate formula. We take the $120,000 NOI, divide that by the list price, that's $1,500,000, then that will give us 0.08. And so now we plug in the numbers. We just plugged in the numbers. And so now that 0.08, we want to convert that to percentage. So the correct answer is 8%. 8%. C, 8%. So a cap rate in risk, the capitalization rate, or the cap rate, helps the investor to measure the return they're getting compared to the price they're paying for the property. But it also helps them to measure risk. And so the basic idea of this, what an investor is looking at, is higher the cap rate usually means a higher potential return. But it could also mean a higher risk. When they're looking at a lower cap rate, usually means a lower risk, but a lower rate of return. So they might want a cash flow analysis. And what a cash flow analysis is, it helps investors to determine how much money will this property actually put into my pocket. And so this is huge for investors. When they're purchasing rental properties or duplexes, they'll look at apartment buildings, and investors will tend to use this to help them determine what the cash flow analysis is. So when we're determining the cash flow analysis, the order matters. The order matters. Now, if you have the worksheet, this is a great place to follow along with. And so you start with the big income. Then you subtract the expenses step by step. So we're going to look at the simple cash flow formula. The potential gross income is then you minus the vacancy losses, then you minus the collection losses. That will then give you the gross effective income. Then from the gross effective income, you will minus the operating expenses. That would then give you the net operating income, the NOI. Now from the NOI, we minus the debt services, the mortgage. Then that will give the cash flow before taxes. So let's take a look here. Example is a duplex investment property. An investor owns a duplex. The property could collect $60,000 per year in rent if both units stayed rented all year. This is the potential gross income. And so step one, there is a vacancy loss because one unit is not rented. And so one unit set for 2 months, and that is a lost rent of $60,000. So what we do now is take the $60,000 per year rent, subtract the $6,000 of the lost rent, that gives us $54,000. So now we have the effective gross income. The effective gross income. So now we've got a collection loss because one tenant stops paying the rent. So that is a lost income of $2,000. So now we're going to take that lost income, subtract that from $54,000. That then gives us $52,000. 54,000 minus 2,000 gives us 52,000. 52,000 is our effective gross income. Now we want to look at the operating expense. What does it cost to operate this duplex? So now we're going to subtract the maintenance, the insurance, the taxes, the property management, and the repairs. All of those things added up gives us $18,000. So now we take that $52,000, we minus the $18,000, and that gives us $34,000. So now, what about the net operating income? And this part is important. NOI is calculated before mortgage payments. Before mortgage payments. And this is where people get tripped up on a little bit. Debt services is the last thing that we add. So now there's a mortgage of $20,000. We are now going to take that $34,000, that's the NOI. We're going to minus the debt services of $20,000. And so that gives us $14,000. And so the cash flow before taxes is going to be $14,000. Cash flow is what's left after the bills are paid. Great job on following along through that. If you need to, rewind the video and work through that steps again and use the worksheet that's provided for you in the link below. Let's talk about gross rent multiplier. What a gross rent multiplier is a quick shortcut investors and appraisers use to estimate the value of small income producing properties, usually for duplexes or triplexes or quadplexes, or maybe small single family rental homes. So the formula for that would be the sales price divided by the monthly rent. That would give us the gross rent multiplier. So a sales price of $90,000 minus $750 monthly rent, that would give us $120 for gross rent multiplier. $120 for gross rent multiplier. So let's wrap this up. We've talked through a lot of stuff here. Let's do a rapid fire big test point review. Appraisals, opinion of value by a licensed appraiser. Brokers, we only estimate probable sale price. Brokers only estimate the probable sales price. DUST, that's the acronym to help us determine value. DUST, demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. SS, subtract superior if it's better than the subject. II, increase inferior property. Increase the inferior comparable if worse than the subject property. You always adjust the comp, never adjust the subject. Never adjust the subject. We've talked about the cost approach. The cost approach is land value plus the replacement cost to make it brand new minus the depreciation. That equals property value. Understand that land never depreciates. Functional obsolescence inside property lines, and it's usually curable. Economic obsolescence, that's outside property lines, usually incurable. Cap rate formula is NOI divided by the rate gives you the value. NOI divided by the rate gives you the value. All right, everybody, that is chapter 13, real property valuation. This is an important chapter for you in North Carolina real estate exam because it combines vocabulary, concepts, math, appraisal methods, and practical broker knowledge. If this video helped you, like it below and then subscribe to the channel and be sure to share it with another pre-licensed students. And don't forget the chapter 13 worksheet. Use that as an exam review. That is provided in the link below. And remember, you're not here just to learn to pass the test. You're learning the language of real estate to become a great real estate agent. If you got questions at any time, feel free to reach out to me. And if I can be an assistance or help you with anything, feel free to reach out because I am here to help you from licensing to close.